All right, I'd like to call this public meeting to order on January 19th, 2022, and I'll start with roll call. Councillor Sapoulis.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Here.
Councillor Bulmer.
Here.
Councillor Gorda.
I'm here.
The purpose of this public meeting is to inform and provide the public with the opportunity to ask questions or to express views with respect to the township's proposed 2022 budget. Councillors are here to observe and listen to your comments. However, they will not make any decisions this evening. The township requested that you notify by email Mary Hassan at mhassan, H-A-S-A-N, at puslinch.ca or by phone at 519-763-1226, extension 222, if you wish to be on record regarding this matter. Please note the meeting is video and audio recorded, and all electronic meetings are uploaded to the municipality's YouTube page. By registering to participate in the meeting by electronic means, you are consenting to have your likeness and comments recorded and posted on YouTube. The format of this public meeting is as follows. Mary Hassan, Director of Finance Treasurer, will present the proposed 2022 budget and any further relevant information. Following this, the public can obtain clarification, ask questions, and express their views. Members of the public are permitted 10 minutes each to ask questions and express their views. This time limit is imposed to provide each member of the public an opportunity to speak. Staff will attempt to answer questions or respond to concerns this evening. If this is not possible, staff will follow up and obtain this information. Responses will be provided when this matter is brought forward and evaluated by council at a February 9th, 2022 regular council meeting. I'll hand it over to Ms. Hassan.
Hello, council. Hello, public. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to do the PowerPoint presentation. One moment, please.
Mary, if you're having a trouble with it, I don't mind sharing as well.
Okay, yes, if you can share, Ms. Hvac, and I will let you know when to go to the next slide.
Okay, for sure. Just give me one moment.
Thank you. You can go to the next slide, Courtney. Thank you. So today we will just discuss the budget process. Basically, the main objectives of today's meeting is to educate and inform you about the township's finances and the proposed 2022 budget and receive feedback that staff and council can consider before finalizing the budget. Again, we'll hold questions until the end of the presentation. So the budget process is the first item that we'll discuss, and just how the property taxes are divided between the school boards, the county, and the township. How the budget has changed from 2021, the impacts of the proposed budget on the median typical properties in the township, what's included in the operating budget, the 2022 capital budget and long-term forecast, which is over 10 years, and the township's discretionary and restricted reserves. Next slide, please. So again, the budget is a very reiterative process. It actually commenced in June of 2021, where we facilitated a meeting with council to discuss objectives and direction to staff for the preparation of the budget. August and September, we worked on developing the operating and capital budgets between department heads, the Director of Finance, Treasurer, and the Chief Administrative Officer. And then September, we had our public information meeting for user fees and charges, and user fees and charges are a significant input in the operating budget. October 27th, the first draft of the capital budget was presented to council. November 17th, we presented the first draft of the operating budget to council. January 13th, we presented the second draft of the capital and operating budget to council, which included the assessment figures for 2022 that we received from MPAC. Today, we're having our public information meeting for budget input, and we have had surveys on Engage plus Lynch throughout this process for user fees and charges and the budget process for public's input through those avenues as well. And the goal is that in February 2022, we will adopt the 2022 budget. So the process doesn't end when the budget is adopted. The budget is our best estimate on the township's revenues and expenditures for the year. As we all know, costs change, new projects will arise, and projects may be delayed when better information is available. However, the budget process is necessary in order to set the property taxes to be collected for the year. Next slide, please. This slide discusses the property tax allocations for residential, farmland, commercial, and industrial properties. So property taxes aren't only allocated to the township, they're also allocated to the County of Wellington and the boards of education. When you pay your taxes, the township receives a relatively small share of the taxes. There will be future slides in this presentation deck that will provide you with this information in a pie chart format as well. Next slide, please. So this is the 2022 proposed tax levy in comparison to the 2021 approved tax levy through the budget process in 2021 and what we are currently proposing in 2022. Next slide, please. So of the total tax levy, 69% of the township's tax levy is funding the operating budget, 31% is funding the capital budget. And again, this allocation remains consistent to the 2021 approved budget. So for the taxes that do stay here at the township, again, there are tax allocations to the County of Wellington and the school boards. 69% of those taxes are allocated to the operating budget, with the remainder allocated to the capital budget. Next slide, please. This slide discusses the services that the township provides. So Parks and Recreation, our Parks, Optimus Recreation Center and Puss Lynch Community Center, Fire and Rescue Services, Public Works, Roads and Related Services, Bylaw Enforcement, Planning and Development, Source Water Protection, Building Services, and General Government, which includes council and committees, election, corporate costs, and finance. So this budget, the proposed 2022 budget, includes some additional expenditures related to the election that occurs every 4 years as well. Next slide, please. So this slide here only explains how the tax levy has changed from 2021. The next few slides will factor in growth in the township and the change in taxes for the median typical property in the township of Puss Lynch. So just this compares the 2022 proposed tax levy to the 2021 approved tax levy, but it doesn't factor in the median typical property in the township. That analysis will be coming up further in this slide deck. Next slide, please. So as I previously indicated, the 2022 municipal election is an additional item that's showing up this year that's non-recurring. Also, we have an increase in the operating tax levy related to some increased service levels related to addition of a full-time bylaw enforcement officer, addition of a full-time equipment operator in public works, addition of a part-time crossing guard. We have the mandated increase in Ontario minimum wage, which factors into the operating budget, and an unavoidable increase in insurance premium costs based on the renewal that we received from our insurance provider. Next slide, please. So when determining the tax levy requirements, the township obtains the assessment changes from the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, and then we are able to incorporate those assessment changes to the median typical property to ensure that the tax levy that's being proposed for 2022 is reasonable. So the 2022 returned assessment rule has resulted in little to no assessment changes. This is consistent with the 2021 assessment rule, and this relates to the province's postponement of the 2022 assessment updates because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Fortunately, though, we do have new assessment growth in the township. So the township's 2022 new assessment growth is approximately 1.73% or 43 million. And this relates to new construction and renovations. If there had not been any new assessment growth in the township, the proposed 2022 budget would have resulted in a higher township tax increase for the median typical single family home. And so this slide just depicts what that would have been if there had not been any assessment growth. Next slide, please. So when we look at the median typical property tax classes at the township, we look at the single family home, the farmland property, small retail commercial property, standard industrial property. The township and the county tax rate is preliminary until the county tax policy is adopted by county council, and that usually happens in May. And the county's proposed budget is scheduled to be approved in January of 2022. The education tax rates are also going to be finalized through regulation at a future date. Next slide, please. So this slide shows that the proposed budget results in a township tax increase of 3.83% and $40, and a blended tax increase of 2.03% and $116. So as you can see, the blended impact is lower than the township impact because the township's percentage of the property tax bill is much lower than the county and education taxes combined. And so this is based on a 2021 assessment and a 2022 assessment of $604,700. Next slide, please. This just depicts that the percentage allocations by the county, the township, and the education, so and the school boards. Next slide, please. So for the median typical farmland property with an assessment of $717,200, the proposed 2022 budget results in a township tax increase of 3.83% and $12, and a blended tax increase of 1.98% and $34 on the median typical farmland property. Next slide, please. And this is just the percentage of the total tax bill by the school boards, the township, and the county for the median typical farmland property. The next slide provides the proposed budget for the median typical small retail commercial property with an assessment of $523,000. As I had indicated in a previous slide, for the majority of properties, unless there's assessment growth on the property, like a renovation or an expansion, the 2021 assessment and the 2022 assessment have remained the same due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the province's decision to postpone the reassessment cycle. So for the small retail commercial property, this assessment is at $523,000. And this results again in a township tax increase of 3.83% and $51, and a blended increase of 1.35% and $146. Next slide, please. And this is just the allocation between the various organizations. So 42% goes to the school boards, 13% goes to the township, and 45% of the total tax bill goes to the county. Next slide, please. So this slide discusses the same type of analysis on the median typical standard industrial property. Again, the assessment hasn't changed from 2021. It's $1,181,000. And the proposed budget results in a township tax increase of 3.83% and $185, and a blended tax increase of 1.61% and $530. Next slide, please. Again, the township has a relatively small percentage of the total tax bill at 15%. The school boards have 31%, and the county gets 54% for the standard industrial property. Next slide, please. Yep, thank you. So there was a draft bylaw included with the agenda package today, which included the operating and capital budget details on our website. So the next few slides will just discuss the operating budget and the impacts with operating. Next slide, please. So similar to previous years, the percentage of the property tax for each service, Public Works is the most significant at 38%, then general government, fire and rescue, parks and recreation, bylaw, planning, and source water protection. Building is not tax levy funded, so building doesn't have a percentage of tax levy funding. Next slide, please. The total operating expenditures by type, the percentages are consistent to previous years, and this is just a slide showing the different categories of expenditures and the percentages with those expenditures. Next slide, please. This slide is discussing the total operating revenues by type. Operating property taxes are the highest allocation similar to previous years, and then user fees and licenses, payments in lieu of taxes, grants and other recoveries, and penalties and interest. Next slide, please. So the next few slides discuss the 2022 proposed capital budget and long-term forecast. Next slide. Again, Public Works, so bridges, culverts, roads, has the most significant capital budget in there. In the corporate cost center, one of the significant items in there is our contribution to our asset management discretionary reserve, which we'll discuss more in upcoming slides. In parks, we have some significant parks projects, which are grant funded. Fortunately, the township was successful in a few grants, same with the municipal office. So we'll talk about those projects in the next few slides. Next slide, please. This slide discusses how the capital budget, its various funding sources. So the capital tax levy, which has been slightly increased from last year, discretionary reserves, and the majority of that is our asset management discretionary reserve, and the aggregate levy funding that the aggregate levy royalty that we receive. Grants is another significant portion. We've been fortunate enough to be successful in a couple grant applications in the last couple of years. The Canada Community Building Fund, which was previously the gas tax fund, the township received a top-up payment in 2021, and so we're able to utilize more of this funding to fund our capital budget. The top-up payment was a one-time top-up payment, so that's why we're seeing a little bit of an increase in this funding. And then the restricted reserves funding is things like our cash in lieu of parkland restricted reserve and our development charges. Next slide, please. So in Public Works, we have our bridge and culvert inspections. This is a reserve contribution. Our next bridge and culvert inspection report is due in 2023. So this is a contribution to the reserve to fund that project in 2023. The Leslie Road West, Watson Road South to Bridge 5, that's engineering costs associated with that project. Kerr Crescent Stormwater Management Facility, Carroll Pond and Lessick Jazzle Municipal Drain Closed Circuit Television Inspection, Gilmore Culvert. So we had some engineering that we incurred in 2021, and the construction works will be occurring in 2022. Carriage Lanes Storm Water Management Facility, Little's Bridge, and that's some engineering works to commence construction in 2023. The next item is our gravel roads improvement discretionary reserve contribution, which has increased from what we contributed in 2021 by 50,000 at 207,800. The next item is the concession 1 culvert, concession 7 paving project, and the roadside mower for grader 502. Next slide, please. In our corporate cost center, we have our asset management discretionary reserve contribution. And so this is, I'll talk further about the asset management reserve in upcoming slides. Our computer equipment, we have a 5-year life cycle on our computers. And so those that have met that threshold are up for replacement. Computer equipment for the new term of council. Another reserve contribution to our corporate information technology discretionary reserve. County road diet through Aberfoyle peer review, County of Wellington study on additional employment lands in the township, which is grant funded. 401 and Highway 6 project review of hotspots. It's a 2-year project, so the 2022 budget has 5,000 in the budget, and then there's some funds allocated to 2023 related to this project. Next slide, please. So in parks, again, we have a couple of significant projects in parks, which are partially funded by the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. So the Puslinch Community Center Park renovation and upgrade phase 2 project. Phase 1 of the Puslinch Community Center Park renovation and upgrade, that's a capital carry forward project from 2021. Replacement of the lights at Old Morrison Park, that's also a capital carry forward project from 2021. And then the replacement of Morrison Meadows bleachers and 6-seat high bleachers will be occurring in 2022. Next slide, please. So in our municipal office cost center, just a few items. The municipal office HVAC upgrades and the accessible washroom upgrades are both grant funded. And also the municipal office design renovation and addition, the amount is to be determined. We're currently working through a space needs analysis related to that item. Next slide, please. Fire and rescue services, the structural firefighter gear. This is an annual amount for those gear that reach their 10-year life cycle. Radio system update, and then there's some capital carry forward projects that are more significant in fire rescue services related to the Rescue 35 truck replacement. At the Puslinch Community Center and the Optimus Recreation Center, LED lighting upgrades. And in the building cost center, some septic re-inspections as required every 5 years in the Source Water Protection Act. Next slide, please. So this slide basically provides the 2022 capital budget and forecast. It provides what our budgeted capital expenditures are over the 10-year period and what the average expenditures are over the 10-year period. Next slide, please. Discretionary and restricted reserves. So the next slide, Ms. White-Fox, can you put it to the next slide, please? Thank you. So these are our balances in our discretionary and restricted reserves. And as you can see, they are increasing year over year, which is really good to see because we have been doing a good job of contributing to these reserves, including any surplus funds that we obtain. We have been doing council has been doing a great job of directing staff to contribute those funds to our asset management discretionary reserve to fund asset replacement projects. Next slide. So this is our budgeted contributions to capital and operating discretionary reserves. And so the majority of the capital contribution to capital discretionary reserves relates to the contribution of approximately 1.2 million into the asset management discretionary reserve. And that is in order for the township to maintain a minimum target balance of 2 million and a maximum target balance of 4 million in its reserve in accordance with the asset management plan recommendations. Council also in previous years established a gravel roads improvement discretionary reserve for the purpose of improving the township's gravel roads. A contribution of 207,800 is currently budgeted to be contributed to this reserve as part of the 2022 budget. The majority of the operating contribution to discretionary reserves relates to the aggregate levy in order to fund public works capital projects. Next slide, please. So I would welcome questions or comments at this point.
Thank you, Mary. That was a great presentation. Ms. White-Fox, can you ask the attendees if there's any questions?
Certainly, if there's any attendees in the gallery that would like to have any questions or comments, if you can use the raise your hand feature just at the bottom of your screen. Mr. Chair, I don't see any hands being raised.
Thank you. All right. I declare this public meeting closed. Council will take no action on this matter tonight. Staff will be reporting at the February 9th, 2022 regular council meeting with a recommendation for council's consideration. If you wish to receive further notification on this matter, notify by email Mary Hassan at mhassan, Hassan, @postage.ca, or by phone at 519-763-1226, extension 222. Only those persons who leave their names will be provided further notification. If you wish to speak to the matter when it is brought before council in the future, you must register as a delegation with the township clerk prior to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you
Have a
very
great
much.
night. Good job, Mary.
Thank you. Bye.